Good evening. Greetings in the name of Christ and on behalf of the Michigan Conference. I am Lillian Daniel, your Michigan Conference Minister, and I am delighted to be kicking off a panel discussion on the state of the church. And this is just wonderful to see you all here. It really is. I wish you could see yourselves from up here. You look great. You really do. And so a year ago, I did a State of the Church conversation with our UCC General Minister and President, as well as an ecumenical guest from the United Church of Canada. And today we also have an ecumenical guest from the United Church of Canada. It is Reverend Dr. Kenji Marui, and we go way back. We met in...
Okay, hello. and let me just say, first and foremost, you do all look amazing. She's not lying there. And my boss, Mark Laird, who was the ecumenical guest from the United Church of Canada last year, also says hello to anybody that might know him. I will extend that hello to anybody who would not know him. So Mark Laird does say hi on behalf of Antler River Watershed Regional Council, Horseshoe Falls Regional Council, and Western Ontario Waterways Regional Council of the United Church of Canada. But
we're just the Michigan Conference.
Yeah. But I remember meeting Lillian in Kingston, Ontario at an alumni conference of my theological college, and she was a keynote presenter right before she was about to break through with her spiritual but not religious kind of takedown. And so that's when that started a relationship in my mind with her. But I think it was the first year of my Doctor of Ministry degree. I was in Minnesota, and my first weekend off. Well, Susan, you know this. I rented a car and went to visit a friend of mine in Illinois, but Sunday morning happened to be in Dubuque, Iowa, on purpose. And so I'm in the church. I was super early, so I had lots of time to walk around and just kind of see what Lily does. And she comes out and, as every good pastor does, introduced herself, says, "Hello, I'm Lillian." And I said, "I know." And that's how it began.
And I think then we took you out to lunch with the new members.
That's right.
Okay, so officially you did leave the United Church of Canada and join us that day because we bought you lunch. I'm just gonna know that.
Tell my boss, Mark.
Yeah. So Kenji and I are paths across, but he has a really unique role in his denomination right now. He is the chair of the business committee of effectively their version of General Synod. So he is the chair of the committee that plans their denominational gatherings. So let's all pray for him. And also though, Kenji, just as an interesting note, is obviously a pastor in Sarnia, but has also a deep interest in preaching toward reconciliation. And he has worked a lot with the United Church of Canada on their efforts of reconciliation around the residential schools and the atrocities and pain of that. And I remember one time, Ken, I had the privilege of going with Kenji, and we toured a memorial, and it was the Mount Elgin Residential School Memorial Site, and he explained to me the meaning of all the different things in that place. And I think we went by, we were just gonna see it, and it was like 3 hours later. And I learned so much. So I was so excited to invite Kenji to be our reflector, as tonight we hear from a panel of distinguished General Synod delegates from this summer who have lived to tell the tale. All right, Abby George, Lori Grinnell, Patty Higgins, please come forward. So we're going to have 3 groups of delegates from General Synod. I'm going to ask them some questions, but at the end you'll have a chance to ask them questions as well, to say what happens when the UCC gets together at the national level. You may have seen some of it in the news, but also nothing's better than hearing from them. And the general topic we're addressing here is the state of the church, UCC, but also more widely. Oh, the other UCC. Yes.
It was the original UCC.
The original UCC? Were you first?
1925. 100 years this year. Yes.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
He didn't invent it.
I'm not sure it's around there, so all that.
Okay, so what did it feel like to all of you as delegates to be part of the General Synod and experience the wider church?
I felt very welcomed. I am quite introverted, and so to walk into a room that size, to walk into a room this size with this many people can be very intimidating for me. And my tendency is to shut down, go into my safe little tiny bubble. But the Michigan delegates are amazing, awesome people. And everyone helped me to feel relaxed and comfortable. And one of the big things I got was a strong, strong reminder that as the United Church of Christ, we are unified and not uniform. And how important it is to embrace the not uniform piece of being united. We can all be one and be absolutely our individual selves.
Well, she kind of took the words out of my mouth, which is not a bad thing. No, you're good. It was overwhelming, only because of the sheer amount of people and the way that you look at the wider church. At least for us, the way that I felt, when you're in your local church or your home church, you're in your bubble. You're in your own little cocoon bubble of people. But when you go to something like this, I felt very privileged and very excited because it is so much more than what we know. And that's something that, bringing back to your church or even just talking about in this kind of venue definitely helped. And by the end of it, I was not overwhelmed, even though this is not my first synod as a delegate, but not being overwhelmed, but being more proud and excited to share stories and show your local church and everybody around you that it is more than what you know.
And you all are seeing in the pictures, you're in this massive convention center, and then the voting delegates are sitting at these long tables, debating things, and that's sort of what you're seeing there.
So anybody who knows me, I speak a lot in metaphors and visuals in my head, and walking into a room of 1,000+ people that are just voting, much less everybody else that is in that hall, and realizing that we are all just one small, tiny cog, gear, that makes things turn and work. And then to be able to sit at that big table, probably 24 feet that we had of our space that we had claimed as our space and decorated as Michigan things, right down to the Verner's ginger ale. There was a staple. To know that each one of us sitting at that table being a small part of a church, and then working together as a bigger part of the church, representing Michigan, which was then just part of the bigger church in working, and how we all depend on each other to get God's love here in this world. And that's what I got out of that.
There's Lawrence. So as you can see from the pictures, you're not just doing this stuff on the floor, but there's also behind the scenes meetings. I did make an executive decision to do away with the 6 a.m. caucus meetings for the Michigan Conference. But you can see that we met instead in the evenings. And there's so much hard work. But as we thank this group and the next group comes up, Kenji, could you give a sense of is this similar to what the United Church of Canada does?
We're a little bit smaller in scope. I think you mentioned 1,000 people in the room. I think we topped out at 450. Still quite overwhelming. Could be 260 voting commissioners representing 16 regional councils. And then there were ecumenical guests. We have multiple partnerships and interfaith relations, and so representatives were present for the entirety of the proceedings there. And
How big is the United Church of Canada total?
that's a good question. I looked up some stats for my own region, but those notes are upstairs. I would say 2 million members is what but how many of those members we actually see on a Sunday, that's, maybe a similar dynamic or.
How many of them are the columbarium? We count everyone.
But I think, there are many that in Canadian society of maybe a more progressive bent who would who would align themselves with the United Church of Canada, even though we would never see them. But if in a point of crisis they would need a church, they would turn to us. It was in 1988, so 30, whatever that math is, 37 years ago, the United Church of Canada permitted is the wrong word, but permitted gay, lesbian, non-straight people to be ordained as ministers in the United Church. And we've taken our hits for that, but we're seeing finally other mainline denominations coming to that same realization, and we've been a few generations past those aches and pains. But that's kind of been the kind of church that is understood, that the United Church of Canada is understood to be. At our General Council this past meeting in August, we met in Calgary. We had 100 youth attend, many of which were voting commissioners, many of which were members at large, and half of them were racialized or Indigenous. And so we were greatly encouraged by the investment the interest that they're showing and the investment that we're putting into them, and greatly discouraged by all the barriers and roadblocks that they experienced or faced in the paternalism and being talked down to or dismissed within their table groups, and really experiencing that as one of the growing pains of a legitimate, actual, integrated, intergenerational body, rather than having the youth kind of sit in for some of the fun stuff and then depart. They were in for the entirety of the business agenda, asking questions, voting on proposals, and then doing their own debrief and fun time outside of those business hours. So their commitment to the church is something that we're taking inspiration from and really working to keep moving and rolling along. Karen Georgia Thompson was our keynote speaker too. So sharing in that sense of partnership between our denominations.
Yeah, we joke in the other UCC, but in many ways, in our UCC, we often claim that we were first to do various prophetic and important things, but that's in this country. And in many ways, we were looking to the United Church of Canada for inspiration and courage and innovation in so many ways, as we still do. That's a powerful story about the youth. Okay, I'm gonna let Jeffrey, Dick, Charity of Marcion, Aaron, Ryder. Oh, there you are. Come on up. And how long is your gathering? How many days?
Not long enough.
Okay.
I think we had 4 full days and an evening. And I think that it was costing us a lot to have the meeting where it was, and so that was all we could afford, and we ended up having to convene an online recall meeting a few weeks ago because we couldn't get through all the business that we wanted to. So
That's interesting. All right, this panel gets to ask the question, what resolutions in particular surprised you or generated thought-provoking discussion?
Do I go first, I guess? I think it was a prudential resolution that was realigning how our national setting worked. It did not pass. It was, and I don't want to go into all the details because they're kind of technical, but essentially it was our national office was trying to consolidate the way that they do things. And understandably so, but there's a really strong congregational movement within a lot of our churches that's still this individualism and so on. And I think that played a big factor. I didn't realize how big of a factor. I thought there would be some dissenting votes. I was actually a little surprised that it was soundly defeated. It wasn't just, most people voted against it. It was a 60% negative vote on that. So that one surprised me.
For myself, there was a resolution that was brought and a reminder that at General Synod, there's a broader picture to the life of the church and the life of the world. That oftentimes, as much as I try to be up on news of what's going on, you find yourself unaware of. And a resolution was brought quite late, a resolution of witness calling on the United Church of Christ to oppose the 2025 immigration rollbacks and support immigrants, refugees, and Pacific Island communities. And it was the efforts of what this current administration is doing in Hawaii, particularly, and working to deport folks that have had long time standing relationships with the United States to work and live and be productive in the state of Hawaii. And I was just caught off guard that this persecution was going on. I'm so wrapped up in my neighborhood in Wyoming, Michigan. I just had a text today that ICE agents were in our community at a homecoming parade. And it's a largely Hispanic neighborhood that I live in. I recognize what's going on there, completely unaware that in another part of our country, a whole different segment of the population was being affected. And so I was surprised by that. I was proud of the United Church of Christ for standing up in opposition to that, and there was large support for that. And a reminder that General Synod does inform the church about things that are going on beyond our own backyard.
That's great. And also just sort of similar to the Michigan Conference, there's a long process of how do you get a resolution to the meeting. And there's also the room for the Holy Spirit, where they say if something dramatic happens in the news, in the world, there is a way to get something in. And that was one of those. There were many, if you haven't had the chance to go and look at all the resolutions, there were many very interesting resolutions that were passed and failed. But one of the ones that I want to just speak towards was the one on star churches. If you haven't heard about this, it's called Small Town and Rural. I'm not very good with acronyms, so thank you. Anyway, so the thing about this particular resolution, and it did pass, was that there was an idea of what was the intent, and there was this invitation to learn more about what the intent was about this particular, what does it mean to be a star church? But actually, it which wasn't as explained in the resolution. It was very bare, and that made it very hard for people to vote for because there were things that they couldn't answer. And so I actually went out of my way to find the person who wrote the resolution and learned that it was not actually about churches, but about individuals and about groups who were looking to connect with people from around and get information. I've even gone to some of the groups. And so some of the things that were said over on the floor were different from the intent of the writers. but I can understand the concerns because there are certain things that we are looking for and we're hoping for in our church that people were concerned would happen in this, what is it called? It's a, they have a now a recognition, what is the, no, not the resolution, what did they,
Recognize.
yeah. And
Historically underrepresented groups.
no, but they got a recognition, the actual.
It's right, it's like, so in the UCC, there's the national offices, but then there are all these sort of other groups. For example, the Open and Affirming Coalition, right? Was a group of people around the country who said, we want to start having meetings and ultimately became a force, but they are actually like not housed in the national offices. They are their own group. And that's this Star Church group, I believe, was people who are thinking about what are the unique issues in the UCC that face small town and rural congregations. And they wanted a similar status just to sort of be recognized as an entity. And I think the most exciting part about the conversation was when I talked to them about the lack of communication, not as a dig, they were like, that was really helpful. And I think that is a really strong thing in the UCC when you can come together and have more deeper conversation and give those concerns and hear if you're hearing the concerns of the people who were on that floor, because they were valid concerns as well. So I think the thing that was also telling is that that for something that could have become, I guess, really, really hurtful and negative, they did their best to speak out, to speak their truth without demonizing or hurting another person in the room who may have different thoughts or feelings or thinking or whatever the case may be. And because we are a United Church of Christ that is of many people, of the spectrum, it's about bringing our churches back together. Karen Georgia Thompson talked much about this in many of her, in her sermon and in her speeches about bringing the whole part of the church as one and seeing that we are many. And I think that that's a really strong way into the future of the United Church of Christ. Kenji, does any of this sound familiar?
Yes. It's fascinating that you have a large body comprised of many parts, and sometimes a part of the body wants special focus or attention, and how do we kind of navigate that and do so in a way that is equitable and fair and without getting into the demonizing or that zero sum. Well, we can't give them that because then I won't have this for this over here. And I think that's something that, anything that is as unwieldy as a denomination has to navigate and manage. So, something toying for me, but it's kind of gone from me now. But
Was it so at the beginning, the first one that was a surprise was internal restructuring,
Yes.
motion that everyone thought, okay, that's.
Well, I can understand the pain of that. One of the pieces of work I did for the National Church before this role as the chair of business was I was part of a national task group that was given the work of conducting a comprehensive review of everything in the United Church so that we could restructure and realign. And so hearing that motion was soundly rejected hurt my heart a little bit, because I can understand and know the energy and effort and the goodwill that went into something like that. And I think that's something that that speaks to a question of, in the church, do we actually trust each other? And that's kind of what I see in my own denomination is we don't actually trust each other very well. Like we ask a subcommittee or task group to do a piece of work and they bring it forward for the next stage and then it gets dismissed or it gets pulled apart or it gets rejected or it gets done all over again by people who can't trust that the work is done unless they get to speak to it. So I'm seeing we're not all that far apart in that. So I think, and that's a question I think as, a chair of business, I'm struggling with is like, is it possible for us to have trust with each other in this? And yeah, so when you solve it, let me know.
Wow, no, thank you for your honesty and for sharing those problems that you have in the United Church of Canada. We've never heard of that. I mean, thank you for sharing that. We relate. And I think that was an interesting case though, where I think when you're voting on something in the heat of the moment, and maybe you've been sitting at those tables and it's 8 p.m. and you're tired and hungry and all the things, you are asked to vote on very complex issues, worldwide issues, internal issues. And I think often the world around us and what's happening in the news affected the body that was voting on these restructuring issues in the church. I wonder if any of our delegates would like to remind us of what was happening in the news and what were some of the forces that were at play.
I mean, Trump had just been elected. So, there was a concern. I think there was a rejection of authoritarianism that people were feeling viscerally when they were outside interacting with the world. And that definitely made it onto the floor. And it was, I think that was the biggest factor, was that there was an anti-authoritarianism. And the hard part about that is I love Karen George Thompson. She is not, in my opinion, authoritarian. It wasn't about her as a person, but it was about the position. And that's what caused a lot of the debate, because we might love her, but who's next? And so that all played into it. Yeah, absolutely.
And I think historically too, when you have this autonomy thing that we have set up from the very beginning, and being a New Englander, I would be very strong about the autonomous parts of the body and your ability to vote and all of these things. And actually, I thought that the conversation at the time, even though politically all of these things were affecting it, people were very thoughtful about what they said in the mic in regards, and very thoughtful that there were people who were on this board who would be heartbroken. And it was visibly very hard actually after the vote happened for all of us who were witnessing the people who had worked hard on this. Just as you said, like, it's heartbreaking. You spend all that time and then I want to just say, in regards to political, the difference of the way the person who accepted the vote is really important. It was pastoral, it was grace-filled, it was just to tell the group, it was the chair of the board, like, it was like you know, who then stood up after the vote had passed. Yeah, exactly. And I think that, to me, gives me hope for our denomination, because I heard before I got to be a delegate or go to any kind of general synod that all you do is fight there, and it's like a battleground, and then you guys all get up here and you're like, oh, it's such a great experience, they're so lovely. And I'm sitting here going, where's the battle? Where's the blood? I heard I was in it for the ticket and it didn't happen. Wow. Yeah, no, so the chair of the board stood up and had something probably prepared, or maybe the Holy Spirit gave it to her. Yeah, I didn't see a speech, but she probably took the time before. It was very thoughtful. She modeled grace-filled leadership in that moment, and didn't react in a personal way, but was herself. It was very powerful, and it was also, though, I think, later people said it wasn't a rejection of the leadership of the church, but perhaps it was like a No King's Day moment within the body, reacting to what was happening around us.
No Pope's Day.
Well, I think that's in the background, as you know, a business committee, we are always trying to plan for every contingency and option, and so like similarly, I think we would have had words or liturgy ready for either outcome. But the Spirit absolutely does, I think, speak in moments when she's needed. And that I think that's the heart of being a church more than being a business.
Mm-hmm.
And still caring for the entirety of the body and the grieving parts and the hurting parts. We do take great care not to applaud after an outcome of a vote, or even after our argument is given on the floor, because we're aware that while it might sound like everybody is strong, overwhelmed, there are people who would be equally hurt and by that. So to applaud one side without recognizing the validity of another position is something that, so it's difficult when you have that natural instinct to approve of, to show support for.
Celebrate.
Yeah, it's also being mindful of it's not just your own feelings, but it's our feelings.
We had a moment like that when I was a delegate to Synod. This was way back when, I think it was 2004, when our General Synod was going to pass the equality of marriage resolution. And this was before any states had it. And so this was, a big deal. And I remember that you had the sense that the majority of the people were for it. It was time, it was the moment. But there was also recognition, it was stated, at that time we had a Puerto Rico conference, just like we have a Michigan conference. And the leaders from that body said, if you vote for this, yes, you're going to lose the Puerto Rico conference. And so it was like in moving forward in one type of inclusion and diversity, we were going to lose on the other side. And then it makes me emotional. And then he said, but you should still vote your conscience. And then we voted, and it was overwhelmingly positive. But our president and general minister at the time had said, when this happens, do not applaud because of this. And then he proceeded to read a prayer, but he told us before, he said, I've written a prayer that could go either way. And how we listened to that prayer. And then to come full circle, so we did lose the Puerto Rico conference at that time, that happened. But at this General Synod, we had a resolution of whether to welcome back in the Puerto Rico church. Do any of you want to comment on that one?
I mean, that was again one of those conversations that I think, there was still the question, like we're still we're still taking this stance for our LGBTQ plus people, and if you want to come back, like you're standing in solidarity, not necessarily in ideal, like whatever you think or feel or whatever, but you're deciding to be in partnership with us. And we don't know what that looks like, but we're willing to hold you, even if you don't hold all of us, but we'll hold you until when? We don't know, the uncertainty of the life.
Because they weren't coming back in the UCC, but we were establishing like a partnership, like we did with the German church, right? And some people raised, well, are we not aligned on this key issue?
Right.
And then others, said, wow, this is really interesting. Nobody asked this about the German church partnership. And called out that. And that's where the body of Christ is amazing. And you're thinking it's going one way, and then somebody says something, and you say, oh my goodness.
And actually, that vote was overwhelmingly positive as well. So even though the thing about General Synod is you might hear, it might feel like 20 voices just did negative, but they're just the ones who are standing up. And then the vote happens and it goes one way. So I think that's also something that surprises everyone, because you don't know how somebody's going to vote when the resolution pops up on your screen.
So the loudest voices don't always carry the majority? Is that something?
Well played, well played.
Preach, Pastor.
Is that only in your country?
That is fantastic. Thank you all, and let's invite our next group up. We welcome P.L. Cross, Bill Dodge, Abby George coming up. So as they're coming up, I will say annual meetings and conferences are a little bit designed like mini general synods, and so we have resolutions that we'll vote on tomorrow, and workshops, and people sitting at tables and debating things and all the things. But our question for these three is, what did this particular synod, number 35, teach us that we want to bring back to the Michigan Conference?
Okay. So this is a whole new thing for me. I came from a Baptist background and was in a UCC church for the last couple of years, and so this is my first synod. And I was one of those people out in the audience who once I didn't dare to cross the Rubicon right there because there was like armed guards saying, you shall not pass. So, but it was,
and to describe it, there is security and checking to see who's on the floor to vote, because it is a voting system.
yeah. And I kind of, they explained it to me, but they were very nice actually. But you knew, so I got to kind of watch this from the gallery, okay? And the things that I'm bringing back are like, I kind of wish more people did these things and had clarity, even when there's disagreement. Because a lot of times these sorts of issues in denominations, it's just people don't get very much clarity in places I've been before. And a couple of things that stood out to me are just watching the process, and everybody was voting on their phones. That was kind of cool.
All the voting is done on an app.
Yeah, and that's kind of fun. But for me, I went to this event as a part of my privilege of call process. I wanted to learn about how the United Church of Christ does things. Now, for some of you that've been in this for years and years, this is just how you've lived. But for a guy that's coming in from the outside, it's a bit awesome, in a awestruck kind of a way. And so for me, there's just a couple of things I want to list, and then maybe come back to me later. But the banned book project was fun. I brought books back to start a banned book library in my church. I went to the ONA Gala, which was a beautiful thing that reminded me that this denomination doesn't just tolerate LGBTQ people, they celebrate them.
Amen.
And that's the way it ought to be. We ought to celebrate everybody that comes our way. And then what was a little bit hard for me to reconcile, although it's all a part of going to the exhibit hall, and then you have other groups. And someone mentioned the Star. I went to their seminar, which was really interesting because I was in a rural church, and some of that really rang true. And not every church is open and affirming within. And I was at one of those churches that I call a don't ask, don't tell church. And, not anymore, but, it helped me understand that we need to try to work together even when we don't all agree, because we have this thing called autonomy. So I was grateful for that. And the only other thing I would want to mention right now, there's other stuff I could tell you. I brought back a robe and a stole, so that was something I brought back with me.
There is shopping.
There was shopping. I was like a kid in a candy store for a little while. It was fun.
For me, bringing back even to the local church or bringing back to the Michigan Conference as a whole is the power of voice. So you see it during all the resolutions, you see it, you hear it, anywhere you're going, you meet anybody under the sun and everybody, you can talk to whoever you want, and it's beauty to hear their voice. And that's something that, bringing back to my local church, I am trying to get also band book project for our library that is currently unused and is perfect. So leadership, if you're listening. But looking at the way that we can bring the power of voice from a united, not uniform, and I will be keeping that, I wrote that down, that is the best phrase, to have that as part of this is the UCC. Your voice matters. We want you to be heard. I think that we need to embrace that a little bit more as a larger conference. Just because everybody does have something to say, whether you're wanting to say it behind a closed door, if you don't feel comfortable, or in front of people, there is a way to do it and a way for your voice to be heard. So that's what I brought back from Synod, and I also brought back to my local church as well.
What I brought back is being one of 2,000 people that were there for 5 days and meeting people from all over. And it's kind of like what Abby said, is your voice is extremely important. Is that it was really interesting to watch people with this shirt. You know, it might not have been 2,000 people, but everybody was wearing that shirt. The shirt, it's the
Into the deep was the
Into
theme.
the deep was the theme. And maybe that could be something that as a conference or as an association that we could do, is we have shirt days or something like that. The other real quick was that I got from Reverend Dr. Karen Georgia Thompson, was her concept of during the state of the church, was that the UCC is made up of many different voices, but we're all part of a big tent. And that we have as I say, the alphabet, and the star, and you have liberals, and you also have other people, and just bringing the sense of we're the UCC, and this is what we stand for, and being the church to stand up. And the other thing was the exhibit hall. there was, as Bill said, there were so many other things that I brought back an entire bag of chopsticks that I still want to give to my two pastors at Portage, which I haven't done yet.
Thank you. And so I'm going to let Kenji reflect, but also you all can ask questions. We have a minute for you to ask questions about the United Church of Christ or about Kenji.
Can I add one more thing? The relationships that I made there are something I bring back with me. Everywhere I go, I mean, I'm making new relationships, but at Synod, you make these relationships on a broader level and it's some at an international level. And so that to me, whenever I've gone to conferences, and I've gone to a lot of them over the years, it's the hallway conversations that bring me the most value throughout the time that what I take home. And so I'm bringing that back as well.
Yeah, I would echo that. I think for all my concern about the future of a denomination as being viable, like having a structure that brings people in from everywhere to be church in the same place and build connections and hear of life in a different place as yours, in a church that's different from yours. I have a mentor, an Anishinaabe speaker whose mantra is, you have to personalize to decolonize. Like once you know a person for who they are and their story, regardless of what other aspects of their identity, like you can no longer think that all indigenous peoples are drunks or on welfare. Once you've met like Ryan McMahon and heard like the complexity of his arguments and been privy to one of his stand-up comedian shows, like so you can't go back to that other mindset knowing what you know about a person. And denominational national gatherings that do that bring people together is the work of the church. And I think that is gospel being lived, and that is movement of the Spirit.
It's powerful. Incarnation. Yeah. Does anybody have a question for this august panel or any of our panelists about the state of the UCC or?
While we're waiting, worship was great.
Oh,
Oh, yeah.
Worship was fabulous, and we learned new music. It was awesome.
Yeah, worship is this.
The decor was beautiful.
Yes, Dave.
Board notes. So what was the cookie count?
500. I don't know what
A
you're
lot.
No, so this is a change. It used to be in general synods, all the churches would bake cookies as hosts to show hospitality. We don't do cookies anymore, haven't for a long, long time. And part of that has to do with changes in the world and who can eat what. And
Although we did, as a Michigan Conference table, bag up Michigan cherries and hand them out. So we did something.
And the other thing is the Hawaii conference one day actually gave out leis, handmade leis to all the delegates. It was gorgeous. I still have mine.
yeah, we found other ways to show hospitality.
I have a question for our leadership, for our state of our church, and kind of just to reflect on, the state of the world and the state of our church. How do you see, with the General Synod and as we take things back, how does New Age evangelism play into it as we think about this big tent and as we think about this deeply, beautifully broken world?
Can you say what you mean by New Age evangelism?
Or maybe not reclaimed evangelism.
How do we do evangelism now?
Not be the best kept secret. and doing what we, make sure that what we're doing inside of our churches is reflected on the outside of our churches.
Thank you. So the question was, how do we do evangelism? First, we try to get the sound system working, so we're not the best kept secret. I think obviously in the UCC, so much of our identity came from a place of privilege and perhaps laziness, where we became experts in telling people what we were not. So we are not the church that does this bad thing, and we're not the church that does this bad thing, and we're not the church that believes this. And those days are over, friends. We have so many people who do not have another church against which to compare us. And so when we lead with, we are not the church that does this, that, and the other thing, people are going to say, so what do you do? You told us what you don't believe. What do you believe? And also, like, what are you doing during that time of worship? When the minister has her eyes closed and is talking, who does she think she's speaking to, right? And I think the challenge for us is to recover the gift of worship and make worship worshipful, with the Holy Spirit invited, and to stop the long, boring preambles of explaining what we're not doing or who we're not. My 2 says, worship is everything. And the fact that we have people showing up for that, we have to be so respectful that they could have done anything else with their time. They are profoundly countercultural. They are not here for a comparative religion exercise. What can they do here they cannot experience anywhere else? What do you think?
That we make, okay. That we're making worship great again.
Yeah.
Am I allowed to say that?
Scream it. Scream it.
But I think, what are the other? I'll try.
You just have to be loud.
Sure, this one says number 2. All right. Similarly, I think there is a ripe mission field for the disaffected queer community, everyone who's been hurt and harmed by the traditional teachings of the church, who still are connected, that still have a faith, that still love Jesus, that still want to make a difference in the world, but have been so wounded and abused by the way that their sexuality and identity have been maligned and crusaded against. If only there was a church where that wasn't an issue, and if only they knew about it. And I think that's part of it. My own congregation, we have, I call them spiritual refugees, from the Roman Catholic Church, from the Baptist Church. I take a lot of flack, or I have taken flack, that every Sunday, as part of the welcome and greeting, I make special effort to explain that Grace United Church is an affirming congregation, which means that we advocate for and we celebrate and we include and involve the 2S LGBTQ plus community. 2S is two-spirit, so a designation and recognition of gender fluid indigenous people. And people say, do we have to say that? Do you have to say that every Sunday? And I am adamant that yes, I do, because I know there are people sitting among you that are desperate to hear that. That's what they are there for, to hear, that they can love who they love and be loved by God and love God and not have to hide it. And so, like, we don't promote that. Maybe it's not like the most Canadian thing to do, or the most meek thing to do, to like broadcast this and announce this and be loud about it. But I think it is, like, there is a place where you can have faith and still think with your brain and have questions and doubts and not have to, and not be, we're swimming in the same waters, I think.
And I want to just add, I used to work with homeless people for a long time. These are spiritually homeless people who are deconstructing and all of what he's talking about. And they need, and some churches say they're a safe place.
Oh, yes.
We are a safe place. And I want them to know, and that's why we need to hear them every Sunday.
And other things that we need to hear every Sunday are things like, who is Jesus? This reading comes from the Gospel of John, which means it'll be a story about Jesus. Who was Jewish? Like, bring it, like, not presuming that everybody knows certain things about the tradition of the Bible, but speaking to them as if they are highly intelligent, curious people who did not get their degree in religion, but are there to hear about that, right? And also, everything that's important bears repeating. That's called worship and liturgy. And the purpose of liturgy was to explain the faith and the tradition to people. So we don't need to explain things like the ushers may now come forward, right? But we do need every Sunday to say we come from a tradition in which we share what we have, not because the church needs it, but because we were created in the image of God to be generous. Things like that, to reclaim what we have to say that they cannot hear anywhere else.
Don't be afraid to use your voice. I am not a pastor at all, but what I can say is with that repetition and that repeating, it's done for a reason. It's not just to stand and say something. And I think that coming from a place of deep spiritual wealth that I feel like I have from my pastors and previous pastors is having that repetition to know that I can go out and use my voice and say, yeah, that's what I believe. That's what the UCC is. And that's one of the reasons why, thank you to the board of Michigan Conference to living into their mission, values, and vision to bring forward what we as a conference can stand for and will stand for, so we can live into that and use our voice for evangelism.
Yes, good. As Lawrence is walking down there, I feel I should explain that picture of Lawrence that says consent is sexy. There was a reason for that. Okay, let's leave that in one of the mysteries of the church. You can explore what he was doing there.
My name is Kristen Reiner. My husband was a delegate, so I got to go, and I want to speak from the children's aspect. This is our second year taking children to Synod. We took them the last Synod as well, and I will tell you that the children's programming this time, thank you, Jen Ringgold, for working on that, because it was I worked the children's program the last Synod, and I would not do it this time. I refused because I said it was so bad the last time. I don't want to get stuck in that again. And my kids had a blast, but I also got to enjoy going to the meetings and things that I did not get to do last time. So I really do want to thank them. It was amazing. You guys saw the pictures. Most of those were my children, and also Cheryl's son, because that's how we hang out now. So just wanted to say thank you for that. And that was huge. And the kids came back with information. They came back with really good programming. They loved the things they learned. They actually had quite a few of the groups came into the children's programming and talked to them. And so they got to bring books home from different, like the Latin American group came in and talked to them one day and shared about their stuff. So they actually got a lot more out of it this year, I think, than they've been in the past when we were just playing games.
That's fantastic. And yes, and so another important thing to happen at Synod, where Jen Ringgold was a leader and speaker on the floor about this, was that the United Church of Christ reaffirmed and celebrated a program called Our Whole Lives, which deals with things like consent and human sexuality, etc. And that was a moment to be proud of the UCC for being early on in that, but also
the need for that kind of programming and open conversation with children and young people and grown-ups. So important.
If you weren't there, you might not know that the kids were right in front of us in the hall the whole time, hearing everything. And that to me was a new concept, watching them be able to play and learn right while everything was going on. Because I was back there in the gallery with everybody, and I could see the kids out there sitting right in front of me. It was great. And the parents could get, like she said, part of it, and the kids do too.
I don't even know where my question's coming from, other than the fact that, hi, Kathy Hesler, chaplain. I, first of all, want to thank the Michigan Conference for sponsoring me to become a chaplain. Thank you so very much. It is my ministry, and I absolutely am so lucky. I also came into a very small church, and I think I'm so grateful that she mentioned the kids, because we don't have kids right now because we're so small. It's a very older community. So reach out to your community, and I think that that's one of the things that I really appreciate about Salem, is that we really are open. We are very open and affirming, but we're open to all, to kids, to the college students, and why I'm saying this and why it's important is because it's very important for all of you to know, me coming from a Baptist Catholic background, don't assume that people that walk through your door know anything. Okay, I think it's really important for you to remember that they're coming off the street, especially if they're new and that you've never seen them before. Please, please, hi, we're open, we're affirming, we're kind. By the way, we really appreciate music. And by the way, we really appreciate, if you have a question, ask us. If you're missing something, if you don't know, if you don't understand, raise your hand. We will take the time to talk to you. Please remember, they don't know. They've been broken. They've been abused. They've been hurt. They're lost. They're entering. They're trying something. UCC is so unique. It makes me cry. Because for the first time, for who I am genuinely loved and accepted. And I want that for everyone else.
Amen.
Amen.
And by the way, that church, your amazing church, Salem Albion, does have kids and do youth ministry, because when I was there, the whole focus of worship was to get the whole church out on the street for the town's Halloween celebration, where you all were giving of yourselves to all the kids in the town, and that is ministry with children. That is unselfish and real.
This year we're doing 900 pairs of mittens for that.
900 pairs of mittens.
Filled with candy. Even better.
Kenji, oh, excuse me, okay, one more, yes.
Oh, I just have, I'm Rosa Gibson. I'm from Gaylord, Northern Association. And one of the things I have to say, I am a former American Baptist, was not traumatized by that whatsoever. But one of the greatest powers of the UCC, and I'm up for ecclesiastical council, just by the way, but one of the greatest powers of the UCC is the extravagant welcome. And I think, yes, I agree, and I think we don't realize that. Sometimes we say, welcome, 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 no matter who you are. No, what do we do besides saying it from the pulpit that makes people feel that they are extravagantly welcomed into this family of God? And that is a number of different things. And if we're talking about the LGBTQ community, it's not this, okay, we're okay with you being LGBTQ. What are we doing to allow you and help you flourish? How do you flourish in this family of God? And that is one of the things that attracted me and has kept me in this denomination. And I think it's something that we take for granted.
Yes. What evidence do we give of our extravagant welcome that somebody who doesn't come to our church would know about? If we were gone, what part of our extravagant welcome would be missed? And if people in the community don't have an answer for that, a response from us of you need to read our annual report is not we are at time, and so I want to let Kenji just respond.
I guess I'm thinking speaking as a chair of business, I'm well aware of the order of the day and the time that we're at. So I will just say, yeah, I will thank you for the extravagant welcome that has been afforded and extended to me here on this stage now.
We are so happy to have you. And by the way, we think the Canadians are brave. You inspire us. You lead the way, and we appreciate you. Thank you, everybody. I'm supposed to say a blessing for dinner. For what we are about to receive, may the Lord make us truly thankful. Give bread to those who have none, and a hunger and thirst for justice to those who have plenty. Amen.
Amen.